Welcome to this week's nail tutorial. In today's video, we'll be doing this Jaws inspired press-on nail set. This is going to be a little bit more of an advanced nail art tutorial, but I'm going to walk you through it step by step. We're going to be using 3D gel. We're going to be layering a bunch of gel polishes, doing shading. So let's jump right into it. So right off the bat, we're gonna start off with the hardest part of this nail set first, which is gonna be the shark itself. We're gonna break it down step by step, but this is definitely the part of the nail set that took me the longest. We're gonna use a jelly blue for the ocean background, and then we're gonna mix some milky white gel polish with some light blue and just feather that in just to create some texture and add to the kind of ocean background and to make it a little bit more interesting. This does not need to be perfect at all, and then we're just gonna feather it out even more with a blending brush, and you should end up with something like this. I always matte top coat before I do any complicated design, so I'm just adding a matte top coat here, fully curing that and wiping it with alcohol. And here's the famous Jaws poster with the shark that we're gonna be painting, and we're gonna need a gray base for this to start. The shark is fairly simple. It's basically an upside down U that's a little bit more narrow and rounded out at the top. Or you could think of it as kind of a rounded out upside down triangle, and you just want to curve it in at the sides towards the bottom there like I showed. That's where the eyes are going to be, and then you can just go ahead and fill it in with your brush. Super simple, and then fill in any gaps with your liner brush. And now that we have the body of the shark outlined, we're going to start working on the mouth, so just continuing to break this down piece by piece, using a white gel polish to outline the top of the mouth. And honestly, not everything needs to be perfect at this point because there's a ton of shading we have to add in, so it's all gonna come together. It's just gonna look a little bit crazy in the beginning, but the mouth takes up a significant part of the photo, so you just wanna try to proportion things as accurately as you can. So this is basically a boomerang shape, and then you can go ahead and fill it in with a black gel polish, and we will add in the teeth towards the end of this design. But again, this takes up a big part of the photo that we're basically trying to recreate. Once that's fully cured, we're gonna move on to our first part of shading. We're gonna be doing the mouth part that I'm kind of pointing to here. So we're gonna use a couple different colors. We're gonna use a white gel polish that I've almost used all of, a gray color, and then kind of a teal blue called Virgo from Madame Glam. And we're just gonna kind of start mixing bits and pieces of each color together. I'm kind of going for a light bluish gray, but then I realized I needed to add some milky white because it needs to kind of have a little bit of a more clear consistency, because that really helps with shading. You don't want the color to be too opaque. So I wanted to add a little bit of that, and then we're gonna take that color and just start feathering it into the mouth area and using a blender brush to basically kind of spread that color around using patting motions and just kind of feathering it into different places here. My perspective on shading is just kind of to go with the flow. It's something that I'm still learning about every day as I try to do more advanced nail art, but I try to do it in layers. So once I cured that first layer, I added another layer of that mixture with a little bit more white and just feathering that down so you can kind of see the techniques that I'm using. And then once that was cured, I needed to add a little bit more gray at the bottom because in the photo you can see that that part is darker, so wanted to add that in as well. And now we are mixing up more colors. We're adding some milky white to that teal blue to shade that part of the mouth there that's a little bit darker. So a lot of it is just kind of looking at the photo and seeing kind of different colors and how they break down and where to add in those colors as part of your shading. And you kind of just have to do it layer by layer, step by step. So that's when it really all starts to come together. So I feel like once I started adding this blue, I started seeing more of the concept come together. And you can also use a liner brush to do this. Sometimes the blender works better, sometimes the liner brush works better. It kind of just depends on what you're going for. So maybe experiment with both, but at this point I switched to a liner brush, but you'll see me go back and forth. And I'm really trying to concentrate that blue in that corner there, but sometimes the best way is just to do it in layers and keep building it up versus adding a bunch at once. Now I needed to add in a little bit of white to that milky white just to make it a little bit more pigmented because we needed to add some to the bottom of the mouth here. So I'm just adding that here with a liner brush and highlighting that part and then adding more blue. Felt like I needed a little bit more in that corner and then feathering that out a little bit. Now we're gonna more or less repeat the same process for the other parts of the mouth. So starting with that milky white and blue mixture, adding that to the sides of the mouth and just feathering that up, then mixing in a little bit of that gray into those corners as well, removing any gel polish that I may have accidentally gotten into places that they shouldn't be. And then yeah, adding in a little bit more, darkening it in layers. Then I went ahead and mixed another color with a little bit of milky white and gray, and we're using that at the top of the mouth. And then we're gonna use that same blue color at the bottom of the mouth, just to outline and highlight that part. This is really just all based on the photo to the best of my ability. And we're just kind of working back and forth with a bunch of different colors. So this is why I kind of say like it's a go with the flow process. Like you can see, as I was pointing to, the mouth is a progression of all those colors. And then the top of the shark's head, a lot of blue and gray. So starting with that turquoise teal color again, feathering that in, and then adding some of that gray in the center because there was quite a bit of highlighting in that area where it was predominantly kind of gray in the center. And at this point, we're just kind of blending to make everything look cohesive, kind of making sure that all parts kind of blend together and don't look like too starkly different. So this is where I really started blending a lot between the mouth and the top of the head, just to make sure there was kind of a nice transition. The white really helps with that, just to add the highlight where needed. And then there was some highlight kind of on the outer edges of the shark's head, so I wanted to add in just a little bit. And then we're just feathering that out with the liner brush at just the left side. I didn't add it to any other part. And this ended up working pretty nicely. You just need a little bit of gel polish, but it really adds that kind of highlight that's needed at the top. Now we're adding in some black shading gel. So when I said we're gonna be using a ton of colors, especially for the shark, I really meant it. So the black shading gel is basically kind of a jelly black, a little bit more sheer. So it does exactly what it says. It helps with shading. So I'm adding that to the top of the mouth, the bottom of the mouth, and just adding that where needed. And the eyes were super easy. You just want to use the dotting tool. And then the nostrils, just kind of blended those out as well. And then yeah, we're mixing a ton of colors here. So a little bit more of that milky white mixture, but for the teeth, a little bit more white than clear. So for the teeth, it's really just, you want to have like a bigger base, and then it's just kind of a triangle that's a little bit more rounded out, but then you just want to kind of lift your brush up at the end there to kind of get that point. So you can see I'm applying more pressure and then lifting up at the end. So just really about getting comfortable with the pressure of your brush. And the teeth are a little bit crazy, so I kind of just added them everywhere and made them all different shapes and lengths. But yeah, basically a triangle that's a little bit more rounded out and you know, pointy at the end. And then I just used that milky white color by itself just to add a little bit more teeth in the background before I added some shading gel. The mouth, honestly, the more crazy you can make it look, the better. And that was the end of the shark. So once that was all cured, I just top coated it. And shading, I've honestly just had to learn through practice, and I'm still learning, but I hope that kind of just helped visually to see like how I kind of mix different colors and prepare them. But that was the most complicated part of the set, I think. So we can move on to the next part, which is we're just gonna be drawing the Jaws logo itself. So after putting down a white gel polish, we're gonna matte top coat it and fully cure that and wipe off the sticky layer with some isopropyl alcohol. Drawing letters, you know, basically doing handwriting, logos is not super easy either, but what I found works well is, this is what we're gonna be drawing here, the Jaws logo, is I use a black shading gel to outline everything. This is basically just using kind of a sketch method to get a rough outline down and just kind of get the proportions there. And then later we go in and fill it with color, and then we outline it with a black gel liner. So this part doesn't need to be perfect, but as accurate as you can get it, the more it'll help. But you can see the black shading gel is a little bit more runny, so you're not gonna get like super precise lines, but it at least helps get down, you know, the sketch of the letters. You can kind of see everything together. So I just break it down step by step. I am using a 9mm brush. I think that's the perfect length for this, and that is the brush that I use most often. I did alternate between a 6mm brush where needed, but between the two, I think those both work well for most nail art, especially that's like more detailed. And yeah, I just am breaking down each letter step by step, getting the various angles in there, and trying to copy my image as closely as possible. When I do this, I just try to pay attention as closely as I can to kind of like the edges and positioning of the letters, just so I can get kind of the, style of the lettering as closely accurate to the image as possible. And once that's fully cured, I'm gonna fill it in with this kind of sparkly red color called Late Night Tip from Nails by Dev. So this part is pretty simple. You just kind of wanna basically fill in what you have outlined. I am using a 9mm brush here, and I am just trying to stay within the boundaries as closely as I can. It's kind of like coloring, but we are gonna go back and outline everything with the black gel liner, and that is where the final touches come in. So I will just let the music play while you watch me do the rest of this. Now we are going to outline with the black gel liner. So these are thicker than gel polish. They're really meant for like fine details, really thin lines. It has a thicker consistency, so you just want to mix it up before you use it. This is the part where I really have to hold my breath, but I'm using a 9mm brush again because the hairs are long enough that I get a little bit more stabilization that way. And this is how I load up my brush. I try to make sure the product is evenly distributed and not like dripping off at the end or anything. So I just try to work it into my brush on the palette like that. And yeah, I mean, it's really just kind of what I'm showing here, breaking it down step by step, line by line, trying to stay as still as possible and doing things in one stroke as much as you can. This takes a ton of practice, and honestly, I honestly feel like outlining with gel liners is not easy at all. It's something that I still struggle with, and it is super easy to mess up. But the more you do it, the more comfortable you will get with it. But definitely using a good gel liner and a 9mm brush or a little bit of a longer brush will help versus a shorter brush. I also like rest my pinky against my hand or the press-on nail. That also helps stabilize your hands. And definitely cure or flash cure in between each line so that you can make sure that it's fully dry. So once you continue, if you accidentally mess up, you don't have to get rid of any other lines that you have. That might be okay. And yeah, once you add your top coat, it will come together, honestly. So I wouldn't worry about it too much. Just try to follow the outline as best as you can. And once it's fully cured, go ahead and add your top coat. And that was just for the thumb. So I like to do this with some character nail sets. I guess you could consider this a character nail set, but I like to basically do like the logo on the thumb, or whatever the theme is for the movie or character that I'm drawing. So this is how this turned out. Now we're gonna do some 3D nail art, which is super fun. We're gonna sculpt with some 3D gel. So I'm using this jelly blue from South Texas Nail Supply as my background. This is also really good for like an ocean background. So I did 2 layers of that and cured in between. And now we're gonna use a milky white. This is the milky white I've been using called Purity, and the jelly blue. I'm laying down some blooming gel. I'm sorry I didn't show the bottle, but I used Mia's Secret blooming gel, but I'm only doing it on the bottom half. So we're gonna do a little bit more of a detailed ocean background for this nail. So I'm just using a very small dotting tool and dropping in some of that jelly blue over the uncured blooming gel and the milky white. And then you just start blending everything together. You just kind of want to space them evenly, and make sure you do this over the blooming gel while it's uncured, because the blooming gel is going to help it spread together even more. But as you can see, I'm using my dotting tool to kind of assist with that. I tried to make the bottom a little bit darker, just kind of showing like the progression of an ocean, if that makes sense, you know, so deeper water at the bottom, a little bit darker there. And then I wipe off any excess gel polish with a lint-free wipe. It can get a little bit bulky, and then you can cure your blooming gel once it's to your liking. Then I wanted to just add some waves at the top. So just taking some white gel polish and kind of just using a dotting motion there, just kind of feathering it in there. I always say this, it doesn't need to look perfect, it will come together. But yeah, just adding some waves at the top for a little bit more detail. And we're gonna be using the white trippy gel to sculpt, so you just need a little bit. We roll it into our hands, always wear gloves when you do this, and this is gonna be a shark fin, so you can see I made a very loose triangle shape, but then once we get it on the nail, we can sculpt it more. And I apologize, I'm using a little bit of a different tripod, but I think some clips got cut, but you just wanna use a silicone tool and some rubbing alcohol as needed to shape it into a fin shape with a little bit of a curve on the left side, and then just make the rest a triangle. The silicone tool helps a lot, but sometimes I switch to a brush just to help flatten it out a little bit. And I apologize if it's getting a little bit off camera. Some of this stuff can be really tricky to work with. It can get really sticky, so I may have just gone off camera accidentally, but that's how the shark fin turned out, and then you can fully cure it. And now we're gonna do a life buoy, I think is what it's called, which is basically a donut shape. So you can see we rolled it into our hands, just made like a really long piece, and then just formed it into a circle, placed it on the nail, and now we are flattening it out a little bit, just shaping it a little bit more with our silicone tool. And once it's on the nail, it's pretty simple with the tool, whether you're using the pointy side like I'm doing here or kind of the more flat side to shape it to your liking. It's kind of like playing with Play-Doh. And then I'm using a brush to kind of flatten out the edges a little bit more. And once it looked like a circle, I went ahead and cured it. Well, once it basically looked like a donut, went ahead and cured it. And now we're gonna add some color. So for the shark fin, we just went ahead and used that same gray called Grave Digger. And this is pretty simple. You're just kind of painting over the entire thing. You could leave it as that, but I wanted to add some shading, of course. So I went ahead and added that same teal color called Virgo from Madame Glam. And we're just feathering that in there. We're adding some black shading gel. And then once we kind of started blending it all together, it started looking a little bit more cohesive, and I fully cured that. So up to you how much you want to shade it or not shade it, but I just felt like, why not? Let's just go for it since we already have those colors mixed on our palette. Then for the life buoy, we're just gonna add some white just to make it a little bit brighter, just basically painting over the entire circle. And then we're gonna use that same red to just draw the 4 little lines for the details. Super simple. You can basically add any details you want with your gel polish. So I just went ahead and added those 4 lines, tried to make them as even as possible. And you can see the look really started coming together at this point. And once it's to your liking, you can go ahead and cure it. And for the top coat, I kind of went around the 3D nail art a little bit and then added it over it. If you add too much over the 3D nail art, it can kind of start to pool up a little bit. So maybe just try to do a little bit at a time and then just make sure everything's kind of even out. I believe you're supposed to top coat over these, the 3D nail art. I don't see why you wouldn't, especially if you added gel polish. So anyways, you might have to like just go around it a little bit and then even out any parts where it's pooled up. Just make sure it's fully cured before you move on. And then for this nail, we're doing that same jelly blue base. And we're just gonna be drawing the shark cage, a little bit of that on this nail, which was really famous in the movie. And we're gonna keep it pretty simple though, but we're gonna do a little bit more of a complex background. So I'm using that kind of sponge tool, which is kind of an alternate to using like an airbrush machine. It's obviously not the same effect, but it's super easy to use, and it's actually pretty fun because these little, the top pieces just pop right off, and it's super easy to change. So I'm just using the jelly blue to create that kind of center effect with the jelly blue, the lighter jelly blue and the darker jelly blue, and then you can use your brush to kind of feather it out. And you just have to do a couple layers of this, but I thought it turned out pretty nice. So I'd recommend checking out the sponge tool if you haven't. And then I wanted the center to be darker, so I'm just using a black gel polish at the very center, feathering that in. Another way you could do this if you don't have a sponge tool is just use like a dotting tool to place the color in the center, and then just feather it out with your brush. This is good if you want a little bit more of a dramatic effect. So you can add a lot more gel polish this way versus the sponge. So up to you which way you want to do it, but I ended up doing kind of a combination of both. I'm just kind of trying to go for like an eerie, you know, deep ocean look here. So just ended up feathering out the rest of that. And we can fully cure that. And then we're gonna use this chrome gel paint from Madame Glam. Just give it a good mix. Similar to the black gel paint, you wanna give it a good mix before you use it. And then we're gonna use a longer liner brush for this. This is like a 12 millimeter, I think. You definitely wanna use a longer liner brush when you're doing line work like this. It's just gonna come out a lot more clean. The longer bristles actually help stabilize it a lot more. So you can see it's so much easier to draw the lines with a longer brush here. So yeah, I'm just drawing the bottom of the cage and then the top, which is just some simple lines going vertical and horizontal. These are supposed to be the bars. I didn't make this nail too complex in that, like, I'm not drawing any other sharks or anything. This is just an example of how I kind of load up my brush and evenly distribute the product. So once it kind of looks like this, I'll know I'll get a pretty clean line for the most part. And then just adding some curved lines to represent like the cage kind of breaking. This was just kind of freestyled at this point because I felt like the rest of the set was pretty complex. So yeah, once we draw in those curved lines, we are pretty much done with this part of the nail set, and we will move on to the pinky. So you can go ahead and top coat that once it's fully cured. Now we're gonna do some chrome powder designs. We're just gonna do like, really just like a full silver chrome powder on the pinky. So I'm mixing up some black gel polish with some non-wipe top coat. So this is what's worked best for me. It seems that if I just do it over a regular top coat, the color doesn't really show up. So I just mix some black gel in there, but the non-wipe is what the chrome powder really sticks to. So this is why we're kind of mixing it up that way. But I added more top coat than black gel polish. Cure for about 20 to 30 seconds and then just go ahead and rub it in your chrome powder. And I use an applicator, but you can also use your fingers. Just make sure you wear gloves. And you can see that it gave a pretty even coverage. And then you can use a makeup sponge to wipe off any excess chrome powder. This really picks up all the fine kind of particles. And then I do top coat it before I move on to the design. And I have a designated top coat for my chrome designs just because you never know, like, if the chrome powder is getting into your top coat, it could, you know, those particles could get in there. You don't want that to contaminate other designs you're using the top coat for. So I would recommend that. Now we're gonna draw some slime. I mean, I think it's pretty obvious what this is, but I'm always kind of careful of what I want to say on YouTube. So anyway, so 3 dots, and then you're basically going to take a liner brush and kind of draw a teardrop shape. So just kind of make those as even as possible. And then for the top, you just want to draw curved shapes in between. So the more that you kind of curve this out and make it cohesive, the more it's going to look like kind of the effect that we're trying to go for. So as you can see, that middle drop really kind of has like a teardrop kind of shape, versus like, you don't just want like a dot with a line connected to it. You kind of want to make it look like it's flowing together, if that makes sense. But you can just see what I'm doing here. Like I'm kind of blending it out, bringing out the shape a little bit more, and then just making sure those lines are as curved as possible in between helps a lot too. And then once it's fully cured, you can top coat it. And that is the end of this nail set, and that was 25 minutes of me talking you through it, and I hope it helped. I know this was a little bit more complex, but it was really fun for me to do, and I hope some of these techniques help you in your nail art as well. And I will be posting another nail tutorial next week. Hopefully we'll be doing a polygel set next week, so I hope you stay tuned for that. I have more tutorials on my page you can check out as well.